when it comes to emotional health, it's being willing to feel everything. It's because you can't selectively choose, like, oh, I want to feel love and joy and connection and happy, but I don't want to feel anger and rage and jealousy and envy. Like, it's an all or nothing. It's like taking a muscle relaxer. You don't get to selectively choose where it's going to go.
Today, I'm welcoming Dr. Natacha Nelson, a chiropractor turned high-performance educator and author of Finding the Courage to Let You Out. She's on a mission to help us break unhealthy patterns, balance the five pillars of health, and maybe even eat mindfully for once. So here's the big question. Are you ready to unleash your life force? Welcome, Dr. Nelson.
Hey, Nate. Thank you so much. What a great intro. You're talking. I was like, oh, who's this person? I like her already.
Ooh, can I meet her? Where do I sign up? Love that. Well, the intro is always poignant, and I want to make sure we get to the points because you are a very interesting person. I think I told you that offline. Like everything that you have going on, your journey of where you got to where you are today is just different. And that's different good, not different bad. Mm-hmm. And you were certainly someone that I was excited to talk with.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
So your journey from chiropractor to high performance educator, which I think is a great title, is fascinating. Like, was there like a pivotal experience that led you to embrace such a holistic approach to wellness?
Yeah, I didn't set out to it. I started in my chiropractic practice. And I realized early on, really within probably 4 or 6 months in, that school taught me to be a great diagnostician, reading x-rays, doing exams, all that kind of stuff. And what I realized with patients and being with people was that they don't follow the algorithms of exactly what injuries, how they heal. They don't follow the formula. And so I had to get really good at asking questions and finding out more about their personal life, about the stress, about things that were interfering with their healing process. And then I would get to a point where I was like, hey, I understand it, but then I was like, okay, that's good, but I don't know how to help them with that part of it. And my own journey ended up taking me, I got my master's in spiritual psychology. So I went back to grad school, and that's where I really learned how to understand the mind-body connection and the emotions, and really took the deep dive from my own personal discovery for myself, and then how it translated with my patients of how much, I knew that the mind and the emotions affect the body. I didn't know how much. And so that was the detour that in 2017, I ended up closing the chiropractic wellness clinic that I had solely to focus on now the coaching and the healing component and the emotional and mental health component. And that's how that all came together.
So on your website, somatic healing is really like the cornerstone of your practice. Like for anyone unfamiliar with what that is, could you explain how connecting like the mind and the body can help facilitate, trauma healing and improve your well-being?
Yeah. So somatic healing, soma means body. Okay. And it's really healing the body and beyond just, I still love everything about chiropractic, about allowing the energy of the body to flow so that at the cellular level, the body can heal, regenerate, and function properly. Emotions play such a big role, and emotions get trapped in the body in different places based on the trauma, based on what was going on in our life at the time that the trauma happened. And the way I describe it is, if you look at the dashboard on a car and it tells you like check engine and needs gas, check oil, our body does the same thing. So our body talks to us all the time. And once you understand how to interpret the language of the body, which is not just pain, but symptoms or lack of motion, tightness, all of those symptoms are your body's way of communicating with you that something is going on and something's not functioning properly. And so somatic healing is, for me, is to help my patients really understanding how to connect to their body, how to feel it, how to deal with it, how to heal it, and allow the energy to flow so that the body can function properly. So
Nice.
that's all that, how that all comes together.
Yeah, that's really good. So is it that that attraction to that mind body, the somatic healing, is that what guided you towards like you call it spiritual psychology versus like maybe just regular psychology and becoming a therapist at some point down the road? What took you, you know, if there was a fork in the road to say, hey, I'm going one or the other, what led you down that way versus maybe the therapy route?
Yeah, I went back to grad school for my own personal experience, not with any. I wasn't planning on leaving at the time, like leaving my
Oh,
chiropractic
okay.
practice.
Oh,
I
okay.
did it because I realized that my life was falling apart. Things weren't working the way that I was always doing things. Like as an athlete, as a doctor, it's like very like just the mindset of you just do it. You just, put the feelings
Mhm.
aside and it's robotic and you do it and you do it. And then if it doesn't work, well, then you do it more and you do it harder and you do something. And it wasn't really working anymore. And my life was falling apart. And I needed answers about what was happening and really starting to understand the mind, the body, the patterns in my life that I needed to know how to break those patterns. And so it was actually one of my patients that gave me a book called Loyalty to Your Soul. And it was doctors Ron and Mary Holnick, who were actually the founders and the teachers at the University of Santa Monica, where I got my degree. And it was that where I was just like, I got to go to this school. I don't know what it's about, but I got to go for myself. Because
Interesting.
my daughter at the time was two and a half, and going through a divorce. And, I needed to learn how to not be so angry, so stressed, and trying to break those old patterns that I grew up with. So it was truly my own personal journey. Then, as
Yeah.
I started to learn all of this, it was so inspiring and life changing for me that made me realize that's the direction I'm going to go in on how to use my skills and also my knowledge and my life and all of it and putting it together to the work that I do now.
Man, that is beautiful. Just to think about, most people go to school, especially like secondary education, and to get a more advanced degree, they're doing it to advance their professional career. It sounds like you did it more just to improve your personal life, right? Like you were just trying to find some answers of where do I go from here, and then obviously learning that and finding that in yourself. Then I gotta imagine, I don't want to speak for you, but I gotta imagine it's like, okay, I feel like I did a really good job of healing myself. Now I want to go share this. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. And even when I started grad school program, I wasn't sure that I was going to be teaching anything like that. I really went to learn something new that I could help my patients.
Mm-hmm.
But like what I thought I was going to be teaching about how to break the cycle of addictions and unhealthy behavior patterns around, food and things like that. I thought, okay, well, that I'll teach and work with my clients. But it was such a deeper experience than that. And it was like, by the time I was done, I realized that I had so many other skills now and a whole tool chest of things that I could do and help at such a deeper level. And it's the things that made a difference for me, because once I experienced what it did for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I need to share this. I have to
Mm-hmm.
share this. I have to teach it. I have to do it. I have to do what I can. It's like that, once I knew, I was like, I cannot unknow it. So I have to teach it.
Yeah.
Because that just becomes how a part of it. So yeah, that's how that cycle worked. And I'm so grateful really for the healing that it did for me and how it changed my life. But it brings me so much a different level of my ability to work and what I do now and connecting on such a deeper level with people.
Yeah. And that's super important, I think, to getting to that healing point, is to actually connect with people deeply and then help them, I don't know, like pull them out and move them forward. And we talked about this offline, like being a coach versus being a therapist, just because coaching is more forward thinking. Okay, these things have happened to you. The trauma is there. Now, what do we do moving forward to change those patterns? Whereas therapy is like, okay, these things happened to you. Let's sit down and revisit those and figure out what it was that caused this. And so, not to poo poo on therapists or anything like that, but like there's just two different ways of thinking about healing, forward thinking versus past thinking.
Yeah, and I use a little bit of both because the way when I'm working with somebody is, yes, we have to have goals or things that we're working on together. And then you create an action plan and then you do it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if it was just that easy, then we would just create an action plan and do it. But what happens along the healing journey is, at any journey, you start to hit spots where you're like, I don't know, something's not working, or something is not changing, or it's just really hard to, I'll use the example of somebody wanting to lose weight. And they're like, it's really hard for me to change my eating habits, or it's hard. I go, well, hard is different from not doing it. So if you're not doing it, that's when there's some coaching involved. You need a new skill to learn how to do it. Or do we have to actually look at it like more of the therapeutic component, which is something emotional is getting triggered. And if we don't face that trigger and heal it, you'll never get past that block. So, I use the example, most often, it's really common for women who are really overweight to have experienced some type of sexual trauma in their past. Mm-hmm. And so weight becomes a way of protection, a way of not feeling attractive, a way of, how they survived. Well, if you don't handle that and we don't deal with that, then you're not going to get to be able to lose weight and feel comfortable, because it's having to learn how to navigate attention and having to heal that to feel comfortable in one's own skin to lose the weight and moving forward. So everything that I do, part of the somatic healing, yes, is creating an action plan, and it's the coaching through it, but it's also recognizing what emotional triggers are coming up that need to be addressed and dealt with, and then in order to move forward.
So interesting. I mean, in the example you just gave, it sounds though, and if I'm not hearing this or understanding it correctly, let me know. But like they eat, or they become overweight to feel, to your point, less attractive and feeling safer, right? In that environment is the I don't know if this is emotional or more mental, but like they then feel like I can't change, because if I do, then there's all the things that I have to deal with again, and I'm just too scared to deal with those. So I'll just stay where I'm at and continue to feel all the negative things I'm feeling, because I don't want to feel the positive thing, because then there's all of the things that they have to deal with once they are healed. Is that right?
Yeah. So actually, I'm gonna bring you back, because one of the first things that you said was whether it's mental or emotional, and I actually want to address that, because that's actually one of the most important starting points. When I talk about the 5 pillars of health, I break up emotional health and mental health as 2 different components.
Awesome.
Emotional health is like the emotional literacy. How are you able to feel your feelings? Are you able to interpret what you feel? And it's how we connect with life. So what I always tell people is, when it comes to emotional health, it's being willing to feel everything. It's because you can't selectively choose like, oh, I want to feel love and joy and connection and happy, but I don't want to feel anger and rage and jealousy and envy. Like, it's an all or nothing. It's like taking a muscle relaxer. You don't get to selectively choose where it's going to go. So the emotional health is to be able to just the ability to feel it without reacting from it. Mental health is more of the thinking process, the logical, rational. It's your mind's way of having a solution, solving problems. And so they go together and they overlap, because what will happen is when there's an uncomfortable emotion that shows up, if we don't know what to do with it, the mind will say, okay, well, I'll figure out a way to not feel it. So it will solve the problem in any
Logically,
way it
yeah.
can, logically. So it'll find
Mhm.
some addictive coping behavior or anything to cope, to push it down or withdraw or lash out. So they go together and they overlap, but they're not the same. So that's why I break that up.
No, that's really good. It sounds like the mental side of it is more like that's where the choice comes from. Like you're trying to logically make a choice to solve it or not solve it, whereas the emotional side is like you can't. You need to feel everything. You can't unfeel something. Like once you have that feeling about a certain event or something, you have to feel it. It's just whether you logically choose to feel it or you
Yeah.
just suppress it. You suppress it or
Yes.
go somewhere else. That's really good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the 5 pillars. You actually you must have read my notes or something because that was my
Oh,
next question. So you talk about the 5 pillars of health: physical, chemical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
yes.
Let's go back to your example of let's say a woman who's overweight and this is something that she's been dealing with. Do you address all 5 pillars, or are those initial conversations just trying to figure out which pillar rings the most true with that person?
So with every client, I go through all 5 pillars.
Mm-hmm.
And in the initial, I go through and we talk about all five. And I go through, it's a little bit of like my doctor mind. It goes through like an exam, and there's a very logical and practical, like almost like an
Mm-hmm.
exam of going through all five. And then we figure out a strategy based on those five. And so we put them in order of which one needs the most attention
Mm-hmm.
and how they work together. And so, it can be, and then something we'll work on one, or we can work on all five. Really depends on the needs and how much and the depth that somebody wants to go through. But we always have to deal with all five, because if we ignore one, we won't be able to go very far in any of them, because they're all interconnected anyway. Emotionally, the emotions play a role in everything. So that's always in there, but we can't go straight to the emotions first, because we got to look at all of them, all 5 pillars. So yeah.
I essentially said you got to kind of dance with her first before you kiss her goodnight, type of thing. Yeah, right. You gotta, there's got to be figuring that out first before
Yeah.
you know where the night's headed. So
Yeah.
no, I think that makes sense. I figured that was the answer of like you got to lay all five out on the table and then just really understand what it is that's I guess driving this person to get to the point that they are, and it's not always going to be like it could just be physical. It could just be they wanted to be heavier. I don't know if that's a thing, or they don't want to be heavy. It could be chemical. Maybe there's there's probably a more physiological thing. You as a doctor are going to understand that way more than me, but there could be a physiological, a chemical thing that causes this. And then they get
Yeah.
comfortable in
So
it.
yeah, and I have a whole team. I have a referral system of all the doctors and PhDs, and because when it comes to, so we go back to like the mental health component. I
Mm-hmm.
work kind of like my wheelhouse is addiction, depression, and anxiety, because they go together, and somebody that has
Mm-hmm.
one tends to have a little bit of all three, and they
Okay.
on different they sliding scale. And it's kind of the same approach. Like as a chiropractor, when somebody would come to me with, headaches or low back pain, I would do the exam and I would be able to recognize what was not chiropractic related and be able to refer them out. But I had to know what they were and what was going on to know where to refer them. Orthopedic, neurologist, rheumatologist, had to know that's, where to go. So I do the same with what I do now. So when it's a mental health issue, when there's breaks in the mind, I can understand what's happening, but that's not the wheelhouse of what I diagnose and what I treat. So I
Mm-hmm.
refer out, but it's just that knowing all of it and paying attention to it, it really comes from the connecting with people and really the willingness to coach and therapy a bit, but the willingness to connect with people and really understand like what they're going through and how things have happened. And, I think part of why I love the somatic healing and the traumatic work is it requires a level of honesty and trust. and the willingness to go back in time, because there are times where the body can hurt in current time, but it's something that happened 30 years ago.
Sure.
And that's part of the journey that we get to take over time of all 5 pillars, but it takes time to uncover the layers and time to go through that. And it's an amazing journey. And it's one that I experienced. That's what I talked about earlier. It's one that I experienced. So I'm like, wanting to share that with everybody. Okay, come on, I'll help you do that, if that's what they want. So, yeah.
Okay. Your answer to this question can't be everything.
Okay.
Can't be the word. You can't say the word everything.
Okay.
With what you do and how you help people, which part brings you the most excitement? Because like the way you just described it, you had a big smile on your face the entire time. Is it the journey of finding root cause, of finding, and connecting with someone and figuring out what those triggers were, or is it the actual healing process and getting someone to the other side? Like the outcome, is that what gets you more excited, or is it the problem solving at the beginning?
So I think for me, there's a very clear moment when I'm working with clients where I'm teaching them skills or teaching them how to recognize, to go below the surface of what they're feeling to understand it. But there's a moment where they're like, oh, I take them through it logically and they go, oh, that makes sense. And they get a healing component of it, which is great. But what's even better is when they've done it a few times and all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, I get it. Now I know how to do that. Oh, so it's like there's something that happens from, yes, I can do it, to now I really understand and know how. And there's like such a big cathartic release when somebody goes, I can do this. And I'm not afraid to feel the pain or the discomfort of things that I've had in the past. And they're like, I can do it. And I'm ready to do it. And I can be there as a support, but I'm not doing anything for them. I'm not doing it to them. It's like they've taken on the ownership of, I'm ready to do this. And there's magic in that.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, we get the same thing with like Grand Vision with our family office when we're working with, physician families who are like, they're just trying to make that change from a financial perspective. And it goes from like, I need to do this, or I want to do this. There's the need or the want, to I can do this. Like, and so I completely resonate with that shift of like, there's always hesitation. I mean, I'm sure every client or patient that comes to see you, there's always a hesitation to come and see you, but they know they need to or they want to. But then to actually like take time away to come see you, and then they have that like breakthrough of like, I can do this because of you. That I can imagine that feeling. It's just it's the reason you do it, right?
It is. And that part of it comes from my sports background, where some of the best, I played beach volleyball. And so some of the best coaches I had were the ones who taught me how to make sure to understand the game in a way that if I was playing and the coach was not there to tell me what to do, I could assess in current time while I was playing, right, if I was making a mistake, how to change it. If I was doing something well, what was working. I could like logically and feel it in current time, how to assess the game if they weren't there. And so that was something that felt it's such a powerful feeling to be like, I'm not, oh my gosh, like I don't have to have my coach there to tell me what to do. I can figure it out. And that's what I want to be as the coach and doctor for my clients, which is I'm here to support and teach. But there's a point where the best part is where the client goes, oh my gosh, I can do this in current time. Even if you're not there, I know what to do and how to do it. And that's the part that's just like, like, go fly, like I'm here and like I'll be your safety net, but go and fly and try it out and live life and see what happens. So yeah.
I mean, same thing. It's almost like you are part of practice, right? Like I played football and basketball. It's like you practice and then you have the game. It's like in the practice, that's where the coach is more included and being a part of every single step. Then you get out in the game, it's like the coach is not out on the field with you, or they're not on the court, or in beach volleyball, like they're not out there. And so it's like, if you can recognize those things on your own, you essentially become the practice person with them, so that when it becomes time for them to go out and do it on their own, they have the confidence that maybe they didn't have before. That's very cool.
And that confidence, I think that's where I understood early on that even the word, the title, my diploma says doctor, but in Latin, doctor actually means to teach. And I always took that to heart and really took that to be what I do. I teach everything that I learn. And I knew that for me to be able to teach it meant, well, I have to really understand it. I have to understand it. I have to know it. I have to have tried it and integrate it, whether it's nutrition, whether it's anything that I work on. I come from a place where I'm like, yes, but I know it. I've done it. I've lived it. I've dissected it. And if somebody asks me something that I don't know, I go, dang, that's really good. Let me go find out. Like, I don't know the answer. I don't know. But I took that very much to heart about teaching and being the teacher, because that's what mattered so much for me with my teachers, that's what I want to offer and give.
I am super excited to introduce to you the Doctors and Dollars 5-Day Financial Challenge. I'm Mike Neubauer, I'm CEO of Grand Vision Companies, and I'm the one that you see on the Wealth Wednesday and Daily Dollar episodes with Nate. So Nate and I are partnering again to do something even more exciting, which is the 5-Day Challenge. We're taking the best of all of our episodes, all of our expertise and knowledge, and we're condensing it into an impactful and purposeful 5-day presentation, 1 hour per day, for 5 days, to give you everything you need to build that foundation for your financial future. So if you're looking to gain the pieces, you want those puzzle pieces and find out how they fit in your financial plan, head over to the Doctors and Dollars website, join us on the 5-Day Challenge. We're putting it together for free, so you got nothing to lose. We look forward to seeing you on the inside.
You do a lot of teaching in your program, the Untamed Heart. I'm trying to think of how, like, the framework of, like, it aims to unlock someone's, like, true potential, like be their best selves is what from what I read. And so, like, what are some of the common barriers that you see, people who go through the program? What are some of the common barriers that they face? And then how are you teaching within that program to help them overcome those challenges?
The Untamed Heart was the original, like, 8-week course, and I've modified it a little bit now where I teach a 5-week course.
Okay.
And so really five pillars made it easier. Most often what people start with is they're like, I don't know what to do. And they say health. I go, okay, but health it's like starting with the basics of, well, what does health actually mean? How do you know when you have it? How do you know when it's gone? And I think so much of what I've done in my program of teaching is understanding the words that we use. Because people, when I think about mental health, emotional health, they're always like, oh, I'm just stressed. I'm like, okay, well, stress isn't even an emotion to begin with. And so if we're not understanding the words that we use and the language that we use, then we're going to misinterpret what our body is trying to tell us. And so that's kind of where I start with the pillars of recognizing the meanings of the words, recognizing what our body is telling us, interpreting things accurately, so that when we think about emotional health, I spend a lot of time in that one because people just go, oh, I'm stressed and I'm upset. And I go, okay, but we got to dig around a little bit. Can getting a little better in the vocabulary of words.
Sure, because those are outcome, right? Like from a vocabulary standpoint, those are the outcomes, right? If somebody says I'm stressed, that was the outcome of some emotion that is not being looked at.
Yes. And so diving into the emotions will guide us as to what triggered you. And then it guides us into, well, what happened? And then it guides into, well, what skill is it that you would need to learn to handle that differently? And so I'm really kind of that practical application of, there's a little bit of like just logical steps that it seems like it's all, when people think, oh, it's emotions, it's all out there. And no, there's I like practical application of things. And so it makes it, I laugh. I have to share this story because it's one of my favorites. So when I first started my chiropractic practice early on, like in the first month or two, I had an engineer as one of my patients that came in. And I was getting so frustrated because he kept asking questions and taking up way too much time. And I was like, oh my gosh, he keeps asking questions and he's messing up my schedule. And he was one of my favorite patients of all time because he taught me early on the value. He came back for the second appointment and he goes, and he's been a patient I've been in practice 20 years, over 20 years. And on some level, he's still a patient and client. He said, because I was the only one who took the time to explain things in a way that made sense for him. And that's really one of those first moments that made me realize the power of our words, being able to explain things in a way that other people can understand, not just what I want to tell them. But I share that because that is such a foundation of what I do now. I have things that I teach, but I teach it based on who's in my class or who am I working with to make sure that they understand in their language what works for them. So the engineers have kind of taught me how to think a certain way. I have friends who are lawyers who've also taught me how to think a certain way, so it's not just all fluffy, like whimsical feelings stuff. There's a practical application logically of it.
For sure. How often do you use analogies? I find myself whenever I'm providing like financial education or discussing like a certain, financial strategy or taxes or something that can be very complex, you always try and simplify it down to, like what an eighth grader would understand. And then just figure out from there, how do you expand it out and really get them to understand it? I use a lot of analogies. Is that something that you found helpful
I use
in the
lot
words
of
that
analogies.
you choose?
Yeah, a lot of analogies, a lot of stories, a lot of pictures, anything that helps the mind latch on to making it make sense, because that's also what works for me. So when I was in chiropractic school and studying anatomy and neurology, I had the prettiest notes because they were all color coded, back when you actually had to like copy and make the notes yourself. And so then when I was studying, I'd study all the colored notes. And then when I had to take the test, I could close my eyes and I could still see all the notes in color and I could follow them and understand it. So I use that. I use analogies. I use anything that just helps the mind create a picture, because a picture will last. Or a song. Let me tell you, if you find a song and lyrics that it latches into there, like you can find a riff of a song that matches, and you can always remember a song. And so it always will come back.
Are you about to sing for us or
no? I was not gifted in that. I'm a very true believer. I love music. I can appreciate it. I don't know jack about how to play instruments or anything.
Same. And I listen to a lot of music, and I think my friends and family think I'm crazy. Like the amount of song lyrics that are in my brain from like songs from the 70s, hip hop songs, country songs, pop songs from 1994. Like I just have so many lyrics in my head. I'm really good at remembering the lyrics. I cannot sing them.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, I can hear a song for like the first, maybe 10 seconds. And it's like, okay, I remember this song. And then I can sing along to it. And my wife will be like, I've never heard this song before. I'm like, oh, this was in that one movie from 1992 with that dog. Yeah. This is a great song.
Yeah. And I remember, and that's what made me, why I understand the power of music to put things to and why it stays in the mind. And I'm also that annoying friend where people will in casual conversation can say something and I'll be like, there's a song that has like those 3 words in it that I can sing the song. And people are like, what? I'm like, I know. It's, you might as well Shazam me because I don't know what song it is or sometimes, but it'll pop into my mind based on a conversation and it makes me laugh.
Drives my kids crazy. They'll be yelling at each other and they'll be like, stop. And I'll be like, in the name of love. Like it's just how you have to do it.
My daughter too, but then the makes it laugh is that she actually likes my playlists better than her genre in music. So she's like, oh my God, Mom, that's such a good song. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm an 80s kid. We got the best music. Everything comes back to the 80s.
So. I don't know if we had the best music in the 80s, but
oh, we totally did. We had all the genres. Everything was good in a lot of the genres. And to this day, like the movies, soundtracks, still, I mean, come on. Kenny Loggins is like the ultimate soundtrack dude of the 80s.
There you go. I'll give you Kenny Loggins. Yeah, I'll give you that. I was
Oh
thinking
my
more
gosh.
like Boston, REO Speedway, kind of that
Oh,
classic rock.
see,
That was
and
all good too.
Journey. I mean, come
Journey,
on.
Journey's so good.
Everything is a
Yeah,
Journey song.
there. Yeah, exactly. That's half the songs I sing.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Oh, so true.
Oh
So good.
man, oh
Yeah.
man. Well, not only do you have
Oh,
an 8-week program that turned into a 5-week program, so working with people individually, you wrote a book. I don't know how you had time to write a book. It's just over your left shoulder there.
yeah. Oh, yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, finding the courage to let you out. So that delves into human emotions and personal triumph and growth and things like that. Like, what inspired you to write that? I gotta imagine it's
Oh,
very similar to what inspired you down that journey. But then, like, what message do you hope readers take away from it once they read it?
yeah. I didn't set out to write a book. I set out to one of the projects. So when I was in grad school, we had to do a project for second year. And the second year, my project was to learn how to do a lot more journaling and writing and feeling comfortable enough in my own skin to let people like read stuff that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my mom in 2017, my mom got sick. And for me, writing was my therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my quiet time at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. It was the only time where it was just me with my thoughts to be able to process what I was feeling. And so the book it started off with just me writing all my journal stuff every morning, like the emotional dumping and understanding. Because my mom was really sick and she was dying. She was diagnosed with ALS. And it was the time at 9 months that I had with her that allowed me to be so present with my mom through this whole thing was because I was writing everything that I was feeling. And every time I would write, there'd be some good nuggets. I'd be like, oh, that's actually good. I'm going to keep that part. And I would put it all in a binder. And
Yep.
then, after my mom passed, there were still some good things. I'm like, oh, I should type these notes up and make them nice for me and make them nice. I'll put them in a binder for my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that binder turned into somebody read it, a piece of it, and she was like, you have to publish this. And I was like, I'm not publishing a book. I'm not writing a book. And she's like, no, you're going to have to publish it. And I went, okay, maybe. So I worked with a writing coach to help me really put things together just for me and just for my daughter. And through the work was really the processing and connecting all of the dots from childhood, from the conversations that I had with my mom, asking the questions, the guttural feelings to be able to sit with my mom while she was dying was because I had the fortitude and emotional strength to write everything. So for me, part of why I named it that was there's a moment where I went through the publishing part where they're like, okay, do you have to sign I agree and I submit as is, like, yes, we'll publish it. And it took me a moment to pause on that. And I was like, I don't know. And what I realized is that in writing it all out, I mean, because I share all of my dark secrets and like the pain of my, flunking out of college and having to find my way back. And I was actually at peace with it. I no longer was afraid I was no longer ashamed of the journey that I had. I was no longer scared and hiding it from people of like, oh my gosh, what if they found out? So when I pressed submit and it became a book, I was so free. I was like, there is nothing that I'm afraid that somebody's going to be like, oh, hey, did you know she like flunked out of college once? And I was like, yeah. And I took myself to rehab and took the long scenic route back.
Sure.
And that's part of my journey that I'm proud of now. I'm no longer ashamed of it. And so that's why it's finding the courage to let you out. And what I hope that really, whether people read it or work with me and understand, it's that place of connecting with your journey, connecting with where you've been in the past, so that the somatic healing also comes from no longer feeling ashamed of anything that you've done or experienced. And you're no longer feeling caged and trapped and scared. It's like you can show up and be with people and connect with people on a way where you just are like, if you don't like it, you don't like it, and that's okay. But I like me, and I like what I've gone through, and I like the journey that I've been on, and I'm not afraid to share any of it anymore. So that was the journey of my book, the long version of how I got
Yeah,
there.
no, that's so good. That is so good. Do
Yeah.
you think that if your mom wouldn't have been diagnosed and you didn't have that 9 months with her, that you would have ever had the courage to let you out and write that book and share your story?
I would have written it because I had started pieces of it. I may have written 60, 70% of what's in the book. I may have written it at some point anyway, but there's a lot of it that I couldn't really complete it but it's because she passed that I could finally write a lot deeper.
Hmm.
Because my mom, like, I guess mother-daughter relationships, there are some contentious parts, and I don't know, had she been alive, if I would have been able to really dig in there and actually write it and publish it. I don't know. So
Yeah,
that's part of the completion of life and accepting all of the journey part of it.
absolutely. I'll compound on that question then, just to say, like, do you think some of the best nuggets, maybe not the best, do you think some really good nuggets from this book came from your conversations with your mom, or maybe the reflection after she was gone? Was that like that last 40% of like, this book isn't what it could be without these little things that happened before and after her passing?
Yeah, so I had a lot of the good nuggets. Like I said, maybe 60%, 70%, but I didn't know how to finish the book. I didn't know how I was going to end it. I didn't know what to do with it. So um, it was part of when she passed. It was what gave me the ability to see the whole bigger picture because there were things that she finally shared with me because she knew she was dying. I knew she was dying. I was like, Mom, you're going to have to share something with me before you leave. Like, I need to have some answers. So she
Hmm.
was finally willing to give up some of those things that she kept so guarded for her whole life. Once she shared them, and I was able to tell her, like, Mom, that's not what I remember. That's not how I remember it. And realizing how much I didn't understand, how much my childhood was through my child's eyes that I
Sure.
didn't know. And then being able to write and see the whole timeline was part of that healing that was on a way that I didn't even know I would get there until then.
Yeah.
After she passed and after her service, one of the most important things that with the book is that it allowed me to be with my mom while she was alive in those final months. That by the time her service came around, I remember after her service, people kept asking me, like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you
Sure.
okay? And I remember telling everybody yes, because I was able to feel all of the feelings in current time and process them and share them and write them. And I lived through all of it, that by the time her service came around, there wasn't anything I had to deal with. It was
Hmm.
already dealt with. So of course,
Yeah.
there's grief and there's that first year of grieving, but that's so much of the work that I did and what I did in current time and what I share with clients is how to feel everything so that you're not stuffing it away and holding back and then it's going to show up later and in a different way. But it's how to go through really hard times of life and feel your way through it in current time. As hard as it is, it can be done so that you don't carry that physically and emotionally moving forward.
For sure. No, that's such a cool thing that you got that experience. I mean, obviously, nobody wants their mother to
Yeah.
be diagnosed and have that experience, but the fact that you did get that time with her and you're able to, I guess, flush out everything that people normally experience at the moment they hear someone's died, the funeral, the grieving afterwards, you're able to flush a lot of that out, which I think is very cool. So, just my personal story: my dad passed away in 2010 at the age of 47. He had
Mm.
a heart attack. He was a volunteer firefighter, and they were doing like a practice burn on a house, and he had a heart attack after they were done. So he just got overheated, body couldn't take it. I was 3 weeks away from graduating from college
Mm.
when he passed away, and it was so sudden. I got a call at like midnight, and my college was 2 hours away, and so then I had to obviously rush home in the middle of the night and deal with all of that. And I'm sure that there's some stuff deep down in there that I haven't flushed out. And so whenever I talk to people who have lost, a parent like I have, it's cool to hear their story and how it may be similar to mine, how it may be different. Because I think everybody handles that grief and that entire experience differently. And so I just think it's, just put a smile on my face as you were telling that story and saying that you got that time and you're able to document it. Like, I would have never thought to write those feelings down. I'm not as smart as you, so I probably wouldn't have been able to do that either. But like, I just would have never thought, like, I'm going to write down my feelings and my emotions and the things that I'm questioning, the things I want answers to, everything that created the book behind you. I would have never thought to do something like that. So I just think it's very cool that you took that experience and you took that moment to write it all out, and then obviously be able to share that with people. Even if it's one person that reads it and it completely resonates with them and it helps them overcome, whatever journey they've had along the way, makes the book worth writing.
Yeah. And thank you. And, when you say, oh, I'm smarter than you, it's not that I'm smarter, but because I went through my mom was the second parent that I lost. So when I lost my dad and I was early in my, starting a practice, I did the exact opposite. I was like, I'm going to shut down. I go robotic. I'll pretend it did not. I'm going to work. I'm going to throw myself in work and I don't have to feel anything. So I went that route,
Yeah, that's what I did.
So there you go. So I learned the hard way, that doesn't work, and it didn't work for me. And it was more painful that doing it that way. Cause I had, even though it was sudden the day that my dad passed, there were signs earlier for the previous year that he was ill. And I just couldn't bring myself to spend, I was like in denial, like, no, it'll be fine. I gotta work.
Yeah. He's my dad. He's tough. He'll be fine.
Yeah. So it was that experience that when my mom got sick, it was like, I know what not to do. And so it was a whole different way of being.
There you go. And it brought you to your purpose. I think that's cool too. That
it did.
Being able to process that differently, because you could have shut down the same way you did with your dad. Yep. And maybe that wouldn't have led to the book. Maybe it would have, but like, you would have just processed that differently, and it would have, the path that you've now taken may not have happened. I think about that all the time. Like, if he hadn't passed away, would I be where I'm at today, or would I've, done the boring things that I did early in my career just to kind of shut it all off, and then kind of realize like, no, I'm meant for something bigger than what I'm doing. And, figuring that out later, which, you kind of dove right in, which is super cool.
Yeah, no, I feel that way too. Like, I really feel like I've found my purpose of, like, chiropractic. I always thought was my purpose, and I wasn't far off. I just now realize that everything about the life force that I learned through chiropractic is now just being expanded in the somatic healing component. So it's just taking it to a different level of deeper and deeper than just the physical body. So I was always very close, but I wasn't always this way. I did take the detour, of other career paths and tried different things too. So that's all part of it.
You bet. Well, a lot of my questions, I've been wanting to ask you this one. Like, a lot of my questions have been around like what I would frame as like one-on-one client care. But you've worked with a lot of bigger organizations, Boeing, Northrop. Like, how do you tailor what it is that you do from a wellness program perspective to meet some of those unique needs that like a corporate environment would have compared to just like a one-on-one individual type of thing?
Yeah. So the corporate wellness programs, it depends when I'm sitting with them, when we're talking about what they need, depending on the size, and is it general? One of the companies that I work with now, they're a nonprofit that works in the inner city. And so I tailor a lot what I do to help make sure that their employees are not walking into those environments and taking on everything that they see and everything that they're feeling. So, like I said, Boeing and the engineers, I talk to them one way, I know what they're logical. Okay. But it's tailored to what the company, not the company itself of what they do, although that plays a role, but it's where the employees and where the people are at and what's happening. One company that, had to let people go and shut down and change, and a lot of change and a lot of turnover, and different things, that how to deal and process with showing up in environments now where people feel afraid to talk or afraid to share, afraid to be who they are. So I tailor it to whatever their employees, whatever they need most help with.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that environment. Like if there is a lot of turnover and attrition and they're having to let people go, downsizing, whatever that may be, are you talking with the employees that are still there? Or are you talking with the people who have been let go and figuring out, okay, what's my next step in life?
Yeah. So, well, two things. Now, I don't usually get to talk to the people that have left unless they find me. So the people who are there, I actually work with them with the grieving process, because people, when there's a change, there's a feeling of grief for the people that they've lost, for their community, their family at work. I usually talk to the executives and been like, listen, something happened. Like, there's a reason that what has changed that created the environment where you had to let people go. What has happened? And I get the feedback from the employees about what they had been experiencing for 6 to 12 months leading up to that. And then I have to have a heart to heart with the leadership and be like, did you know that this was happening? Did you know this was what was going on? And if I'm like, and don't BS me, because I'll know. So I have to have some heart to hearts with the executive teams about what they think is happening and versus what is actually really happening. And because that's where a lot of the disconnection is. And so I'll do separate pieces with employees and then separate conversations with the executive team.
And then they still get that same, I want to call it like that same 5-pillar treatment, right?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Here's what you think is going on. Well, now let's look at all 5 pillars and understand what is truly going on and what started this and how do we move forward based on whichever pillar resonates the most.
Yes. And sometimes it's, the physical and then the chemical, which is nutrition. Oftentimes that can be put into one category so that we can spend more time on the others. And oftentimes the mental and emotional get put together. And then when I talk about spiritual, that's about purpose. It's about connection. It's about why are you doing what you're doing? And that is the same pillars get talked about, but they'll be broken down slightly different if it's an executive team versus the employee team versus people who are, where they are in their, are they on the brink of going into, leadership? We got to have a talk about that. Or small businesses that things aren't working. I'm like, there's a reason. So I do a lot of deep dive to understand the spiritual component of their purpose and then making sure that it's in alignment with the actions that they're taking and how they're handling the mental and emotional component. So all of them have to line up.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And that would be very valuable for a company that's going through big changes like that and making sure that the people who are still there that are going to create more progress within the company after these changes, you want them in the right headspace. You want them to be doing the things that progress the company forward, not continue to push it backwards.
Yes.
And so, I got to imagine that process you're very pivotal in the process that those companies are going through. So that's very cool that you do that.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Thank you. It's one of my favorites. I love it because it also gives me a chance to, when I'm working with, especially with the executive teams, like, I'm not going to bullshit. I'm like, listen, this is what I see. Yeah. And it's pretty much your fault because you're the executive level. Like, it's on you. And
there you go.
And I just don't let them get away with anything. I'm like, no, it's yours. It's you. You got to deal with it. Especially, it's like coming to, a lot of the work that I do has to do with their communication skills of, everybody does one of two things when they feel emotional. They either shut down and withdraw or lash out. And you put that in a corporate environment and it's really like, can be, makes it very toxic and difficult. So I spend that's one of the areas that we spend a lot of time in is dealing with the emotions so that you're not shutting down, withdrawing, blaming, lashing out, taking it out on others and expecting other people to handle your feelings. Like, it's your business, your feelings, you deal with it.
Absolutely.
It's not your team's time,
Love that. No BS. Just give it right to them. That's what they need. I love that.
They do. Yeah.
You bet. Last topic I want to cover with you, and I kind of alluded to it in the introduction. Unleash Your Life Force. That's the name of your podcast.
Yes.
Great name. What? Give me the genesis story of how that started and how it's been growing even up to today.
Okay. Well, the life force has to do with, the foundation pillar of chiropractic is the life force, the energy that the brain talks to the body talks to the brain. Every cell has the life force, which is that's what life is. And I understood that very early in school when I was working on cadavers, and the difference between a cadaver and a person is the life force.
Mm-hmm. You can feel it. Yeah.
I feel it. You can see it, and it's in everything that's alive. And what I realize is so much of the work that I do chiropractically that has translated now, which is so in chiropractic, I remove the physical misalignments in the spine that put pressure and interfere with the nervous system and the life force. Mm-hmm. So I do the same thing now as the coach emotionally. What are the emotional misalignments? What's going on that interferes with the life force flowing? And so it's really about unleashing it, finding all those places in our life where the emotions, the life force is not flowing properly, removing that interference and allowing everything to just flow and flow well, but not just trickle, but like unleash it. Let it all be there and show up. And so, so that's the podcast. And that's where really all 5 pillars of health get talked about. Any component of health, I usually spend one episode is one piece of one thing. So I like to take the deep dive and understand one thing at a time. So that's how that awesome. Started. And that's where the name comes from. Yeah.
Very cool. Where can people find the podcast?
They can find it on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and YouTube.
Very cool.
Yes.
You're putting out, is it weekly episodes?
Yes.
How often
about one a week. And that's been what seems doable for me and sustainable. That's Same. Really how it works.
No, I hear you.
I would love to do more. And so it really was, if I get inspired and there's time, I'll do more. But really, it's once a week.
Awesome. Last question I always ask guests. What do the next 5 years look like for Natacha Nelson?
Oh, this Natacha Nelson is doing a lot more public speaking that I love. And really, my daughter will be graduating from high school in 2 years. So a lot more traveling to get back to, I grew up and I traveled a lot growing up with my mom. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to get back to doing a lot of traveling and speaking and traveling. I speak French fluently, so I could translate everything that I do. And I could speak in French. So doing a lot more, doing the same work, and just wherever, the universe takes me is where I want to go. And that's what I want to do.
Very cool. So you got The Untamed Heart. You have your book, Finding the Courage to Let You Out. You have all the large organizational things that you do. Everyone can find you at lifedoctor.guru. Where else can they find you?
Let's see. So my YouTube is Dr. Nelson, that Life Doctor, and same with like Instagram, LinkedIn. Kind of those major, all kind of the same. You'll post it all.
It's popping up on the screen. It's popping up on the screen right now as you're saying it. So
there it is.
We'll get all those out. But
so you can find me there, and especially feel free. I love when people email me and DM me and connect with me. Doesn't mean it's not about you have to work with me. Just reach out. I love to hear just if anything of this, from this podcast interview resonates. I like to hear about it. Especially anywhere around the world. It makes me feel like, hey, somebody's listening to way on the other side of the globe. And it's really cool to hear. So I love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come and talk with me. And I look forward to when our paths cross again in the future.
Absolutely, Nate. I have a feeling that they will. Our paths will definitely cross again, because it's been such a pleasure and such a great connection with you that I really appreciate your time and having me here with you.
Awesome. Thank you.